Welcome to Sociology of Communication, CLA 215, Meaning and Components of Human Communication, Study Session 1. Introduction. Man is a gregarious being that always derives pleasure from the network of social interactions with fellow human beings. The cardinal essence of this network of interactions in the social groups is communication through language. Therefore, it is imperative we first look at the meaning of human communication. In this study session, we will discuss the meaning and elements of human communication as a process, learning outcome. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Define communication as a social art. 2. Identify and explain the elements of human communication. 3. Discuss the characteristics of human communication. Meaning of communication. Communication is a complex process of meaningful interaction among people. It is such a common practice that it has attracted innumerable definitions. Dance and Larson were said to have compiled about 150 definitions of communications. James Ode and Solar, 2006. It appears every writer or researcher defines communication in the way that is appropriate in the particular context of his or her study. Here we define communication simply as a process of sharing and exchanging meanings, ideas, feelings, information and thoughts among human beings through a mutually understood set of codes which can be verbal or non-verbal. This definition is not a prescribed one. You may want to define communication in a different way. Whatever definition you give to communication, it is important to be sure that definition reflects the true nature of communication as a process, which we will discuss below. Elements of communication. Every process is made up of interacting elements or components. Communication is a process and is made up of about 8 elements: people, message, channel, medium, noise, context, feedback, and effect. Human communication involves people. Those involved in a particular communication encounter are called sender, receivers, or transceivers. They simultaneously send and receive messages. They are no and they should not be permanent senders and permanent receivers. Both alternate roles as senders and receivers. The information that is exchanged between transceivers is the message. It is the content of the communicative encounter. A message has 2 aspects: the content aspect, which is the core distinct information, and the reflectional aspect, which is the affective stimuli we send along with the core information. The short statement coming has as its content the invitation to come in. However, the way it is said, relational, can suggest that we really have been looking forward to seeing the person being addressed, that he or she is not welcome, or that he or she had, in fact, better not come in. The relational aspect of a message shows our attitude, feelings, and emotions towards the person with whom we are communicating. Messages are sent and received through channels. These include our 5 senses, as well as the physical carriers of message, such as paper, light, and airwaves. Human beings are multi-channel communicators, and the more the channel engaged in a communicative act, the greater the chances that the act would be a successful one. The medium of communication often refers to the technical aspect of communication. In communication studies, we talk of mass media such as newspapers, radio, and television. Mass media or media of mass communication can be divided into two. Print media, referring to newspapers, magazines, books, and in fact whatever is printed, and electronic media, which refer to radio, television, and the computer. Electronic media can be subdivided into two. Broadcast media, which are radio and television, and narrowcast media, which refer to cable, the local area network, LAN, and wider area network, WAN, of computers and the internet. In communication, there is usually noise, which refers to whatever stands between the transceivers and makes communication difficult. It is anything that interferes with the easy flow of messages from one transceiver to the other. Noise comes in various forms. There is the physical noise, which refers to that which disturbs the ears. There is also physiological noise, which refers to disturbances arising because of discomfort, fatigue, pain, or sickness in the body of one of the transceivers. When any of this is present, it affects the quality and impact of communication. There is also linguistic noise, wobbling writing, incorrect or inarticulate pronunciation, and the use of expressions that are too advanced for or strange to one of the transceivers. Those bent on impressing or dazzling their listeners with bombastic expression run the risk of creating linguistic noise. Communication takes place in a context, setting, or environment. The place in which something is said dictates, to some extent, the meaning the transceivers attached to it. If Femi, a pupil, knocks at the principal's door and hears yes from within, he goes in because yes means coming, but it does only in that setting. If the same Femi knocks at the door of the low and hears the same principal say yes from within, for whatever reason, he will certainly not go in because yes from inside the loo means don't come in. A good communicator must always take into account the power place has on meaning. Another dimension to the context of the communication is the size-related dimension. This gives us context of communication such as intrapersonal communication from a person to him or herself, interpersonal communication, which involves two or more people, group communication, organizational communication, and mass communication. The verbal and non-verbal responses we get through communications are called feedback. Without it, communication is incomplete, one-way information dispersal efforts. Feedback helps us to know how clearly our message is reaching our communicator. Feedback comes in verbal forms, such as when questions are correctly answered, or when people say yes or no. A greater chunk of feedback, however, comes in non-verbal forms, such as head nods, smiles, frowns, and facial expressions that show confusion. Finally, communication has effects. Effects of communication are very difficult to measure. That is why many communication researchers prefer the term impact and influence. This, however, does not negate the presence of effect. Whatever the people do because of our communication with them is the effect of our communication. There are three kinds of effects: physical, emotional, and cognitive effects. Gamble and Gamble, 1989. When what you told someone caused him or her to clap, fight, hug, speak, scream, or do any such physical act, then the effect of our communication is physical. If it caused him or her to be sad, happy, or frightened, then the effect was emotional. And if by communicating with someone you added to person's knowledge or gave him or her new insight, the effect is cognitive. The result of a communicative act can be a combination of the three. For instance, if the people in a farm settlement were told that in response to their demands, the government has approved a subsidy on fertilizer, they are likely to show sincere happiness. That is emotional effect. Laugh and shake hands, physical, and get better insight into the power of properly articulated demands, cognitive. There cannot be communication without effect, and a good communicator is always conscious of the effect his acts may have on other transceivers. The effect of communication is determined by so many factors. These include the listener's personality, is our background, generally, especially is our background knowledge of the issues being discussed, culture, gender, and so many others. That is why many times different people receive similar messages but react differently. A communicator should not think he or she can easily manipulate people to achieve whatever effect he or she wants. People are not robots. The nature of human communication. Like human beings, lower animals also communicate. However, human communication is different from animal communication and unique in a number of ways. Some of the characteristics that distinguish human communication from animal communication are what we shall be discussing in this session. Peculiar characteristics of human communication. Communication is a unique feature of humans. It, or at least the extent to which we can use it, is essentially what differentiates us from other creatures. Though communication is a pervasive womb-to-tomb practice, it's a complex one. This session gives us some insight into the nature of communication. All the elements constantly interact and affect each other. It is impossible to drive a pin to a point and say, here is where communication begins or there it ends. It is a continuous process. Imagine that you had a quarrel with your landlord's son last night. In the night, the thought of the unfortunate event occupied your mind. You knew your landlord would be the first to wake you in the morning. You knew he would come battle ready. He's a trouble-seeking, blood-sucking Shylock. You told yourself. You started to plan, right on your bed, how to react. Which is a better option? How to smile as usual while he ranges or respond fire for fire. You choose the latter. This morning, as you come out of the house, you see the landlord coming from a distance and you spot a white sheet of paper in his hands. Quit notice. Yet, you make up your mind. Fight, man, and damn the consequences. You remind yourself of the various excesses of this man, and you just are not going to take any further rubbish. You select your words in advance. The man draws near and beams a smile. Teacher, he says, I learnt my boy was rude to you yesterday. Please forgive the little rascal. I got this letter from my daughter. Please, as usual, bail me out by reading it for me. Your own expression changes from the combative to the friendly. After this, you remember the event and the man in a new light and tell yourself, I really did not understand my landlord. He's a peace lover after all. Communication is ubiquitous. Waslawick, Bevan and Jackson, 1967, made the very famous statement, man cannot communicate thereby aptly capturing the ubiquity of communication. As you walk into the study session room, greet some students and look away from others. Pick a seat to see if it is dusty. You are sending to and receiving from others around you thousands of stimuli, sometimes consciously, oftentimes unconsciously, sometimes formally, other times informally. That is communication. Schuller, 1998. You may choose not to talk, but you cannot choose not to communicate. The reason for this is that communicating is more than exchanging words. It is much wider than language. It is both verbal and non-verbal. Verbal communication, which may be written or oral, involves the use of words. Non-verbal communication is the transmission of messages through the use of body language, such as gesture, touching, the voice, loud, low, angry, soothing, clothing and dressing, space and distance, prosemic, colors, and others. Non-verbal communication is a particular complex form of communication for many reasons. First, it is culture-bound. What is accepted as a modest show of respect in a culture may be rather offensive in another. Simple example is the way respect is expressed among the different tribes in Nigeria. During the greetings, simple courtesy before an elder is a lavish expression of respect among the Igbo, whereas among most Yoruba, especially in the rural areas, that is great discourtesy. Full prostration is the norm. Second, non-verbal cues are difficult to record. However, it's a very powerful form of communication. Morus 1999 says about 80% of our communication is non-verbal. Not only this, whenever what we say or write, that is verbal message, conflict with the non-verbal, the tendency is for people to believe the non-verbal message. This is because non-verbal cues shows the true feeling. People confuse the terms oral and verbal. For instance, when they left an unwritten message for someone, they say, "I did not meet her. I just left a verbal message," instead of, "I did not meet her. I just left an oral message." Verbal means using words, whether the words are written or unwritten, whereas oral means spoken, unwritten. Therefore, oral communication, that is spoken communication, is a part of verbal communication. Written communication is the second part. Both make up verbal communication. Pardon the repetition. Communication is a transaction rather than being a one-way street. Communication is a thorough two-way transaction and negotiation. It is give and take, simultaneous process with a past, a present, and a future. We respond to a communicative situation based on our experiences. In addition, think of the future as we communicate with someone. If we want to develop a relationship with someone, we work in a way that suggests that, and vice versa. Oftentimes, we use emphatic comments and expressions to say this. We often do not directly say, "I do not wish to talk to you in future." Rather, we say so indirectly by our facial and emotional expressions, or by verbal but subtle means. Communication is unrepeatable and irreversible. When we ask someone who has just said something to come again, we often do not get the exact representation of what was said earlier. Very often, the speaker modifies his earlier statement and the accompanying non-verbal cues. especially if we sounded offended or surprised by what we had heard. Not only this, a true communicative encounter changes the participants in some definite way that makes a true repetition impossible. No one goes away the same person as he came after a genuine communicative encounter. Communication is irreversible in that what is said cannot be unsaid. The Yoruba say, words are like raw eggs. Once dropped, they cannot be picked back. And the Chinese say, not even the emperor can buy back one single day. Gamble and Gamble, 1996. Summary of Study Session 1. In this first study session, we have looked at some definitions of communication. We are told that human communication is more than passing or disseminating information. Rather, communication is a bidirectional process that involves sharing and exchange of thoughts, ideas, feelings, or information. As a process, we also learn from the study session. Communication has some elements such as the message, people, that is, sender and receiver, context, channel, medium, effect or impact, and noise. All these elements are always present in any communication encounter. For this reason, whichever definition we give to communication must reflect these elements. End of study session 1. Thanks for listening.